The CPI is a helpful measure in many ways, and it's an accurate measure of the basket of goods and services that the Bureau of Labor Statistics calculates as typical household expenditure pattern. However, it does have some problems when we want to use it for measuring increases in cost of living. It's not a perfect measure, and it has three types of difficulties. It has difficulties dealing with the introduction of new goods, changes in quality of products, and also there's another problem called substitution bias, which causes difficulties in comparing prices over time. So let me explain all these three in detail so you have a better understanding of what CPI does and what limitations it has. There's also a lot of controversy over the way CPI is measured and has become a major issue in calculating, for example, Social Security payments. Let's focus now on the role of introduction of new goods. Here's the problem. The representative consumption basket that Bureau of Labor Statistics calculates does not reflect the changes in the real incomes of people when new goods are introduced. Why is that a problem? New products have value because greater variety allows people to find goods and services that match their needs more closely. When there are only one or two varieties of the same product, people may be buying these products, but they may not be fully satisfied because the characteristics of those products may not fully match the needs of the purchaser, of the households. When variety increases, people get a chance to buy goods and services that match their needs much more closely. That increases their real income. So once variety increases, we need to take that into account in calculating real income and changes in price level. In fact, you can think about it this way. Suppose you have a constant level of income, nominally in dollars, and more varieties become available. You suddenly can find goods that are much better, much more valuable to you than before. You're paying the same price, but your welfare has improved. So your real income has gone up, and in fact, if you want to figure out the cost of living, your cost of living has gone down. In calculating CPI, we need to take this into account, but it's very hard to figure out how much people better off are as a result of new goods being introduced, new varieties being introduced. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has been trying to correct the CPI measure for this factor, but there's no consensus on exact solution to this, and the solutions that are available have not been fully implemented. The second issue in calculating CPI is changes in quality. When the quality of a product changes, its price also may change. But that may not reflect inflation. It may be reflecting the value of the good being higher than before. So we need to take that into account. The Bureau of Labor Statistics and its counterparts in other countries try to adjust the price level for quality changes. In fact, they try to figure out what the value of the additional features, for example, or additional quality is on the value of the good. However, this adjustment cannot be perfect, and as a result, there's some error remaining in the calculations. The third source of bias in calculating CPI is called substitution bias. Let me explain this to you. The way the Bureau of Labor Statistics calculates the CPI is to look at a fixed basket of goods and figures out what the prices are, multiplies by the weight of each item in the basket to calculate the cost of living. But that's not exactly how consumers behave, or does not reflect how consumers behave. Why is that so? Because when price of a product goes up, consumers might buy less of that product. When the price drops, they may buy more of that product. As a result, the weight should be changing in response to the price level, and it's not independent, it's not fixed. This causes the measure, the way the CPI is measured by the Bureau or by its counterparts in other countries, to overestimate cost of living. Let me give you a specific example. Suppose you go to buy shirts, and you know the price of shirts is $20 each on normal days. Typical price level that you pay is $20. Now, on some days, you visit a department store and you see the price has been cut to 10. So you know that this is a very good price, not normal. At that point, you may decide to buy 2 or 3 shirts. And at other times when you go there and you see the price is above $20, you don't buy, or even at $20, you may buy less, or you may decide not to buy. As a result, you try to take advantage of the sale price at some times when the price goes down, but when the price goes up, you refrain from purchasing, and as a result, you reduce the impact of the high price on your budget and enhance the value of the low price for your consumption. Because of this, price increases do not actually reflect how much your cost of living goes up because of the way you respond. Also, you may be substituting from one item to another. If the price of one type of drink goes up, you may find a substitute and buy more of it if the price of that other one has not gone up. So the whole idea is that consumers substitute towards goods and services that have become relatively less expensive and move away from more expensive goods. And as a result, the impact of changes in prices on their budget is much milder than CPI measures, because CPI keeps those weights constant, assumes that you continue to buy the same amount regardless of the change in price. These 3 items, the substitution bias, the introduction of new goods, the unmeasured quality changes, they all tend to overstate, on the whole, overstate the cost of living. This is a very important issue because we are overstating the cost of living in the contracts that we have, or in payments of Social Security, or in deciding how much money to hold, etc. We may be making mistakes, and as a result, it may have consequences. For example, think about the Social Security payments. If we're overstating inflation rate by 1% per year, which is what the Bureau of Labor Statistics has determined, roughly in the older days when the calculations were done in much more traditional ways, the overestimation was even more than 1%. That means that someone who retires now next year gets 1% more than the past in real terms, because we've adjusted his payment according to inflation rate, according to cost of living measured by the Bureau, and that's 1% more than necessary to keep his real income constant. Now, over 25 years, this could add up to a whole lot more payment to a retired person than actually intended to keep his standard of living constant. So that's why many policymakers, policy advocates who want to reform, for example, the Social Security system or pension systems, mention that CPI should not be used and the actual adjustment should be less than the number calculated based on CPI. The CPI measure, as I mentioned, seems to be overestimating cost of living by about 1% per year. The Bureau of Labor Statistics over the past decade or so has tried to improve its calculation of CPI and take into account many of these factors. For example, it uses a chain type measure to figure out consumer price index to reduce the biases. Still, this chain method works very much like the chain rule GDP calculation, but some of the errors, of course, remain, and one has to treat the CPI measure with some care.